Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent computer role-playing game. Or perhaps I should just say computer game this week, because while categorized as an RPG, the game I am going to cover today likely falls short in several areas. Developed and published by Stately Snail, One More Dungeon was released back in November of 2015, so a considerable time ago now. One More Dungeon is an action, first-person roguelike with a pixel aesthetic. There are a couple pretty decent games in that genre, although One More Dungeon really focuses more on the action bit. It uses procedurally generated levels, has a sort of persistent advancement system between runs, and even a sanity system, but it's all very simplified. In terms of plot, well, if you can call it a plot, you are an adventurer sent into a dungeon in order to destroy obelisks being used by the forces of evil to invade the world. Pretty much just get in there and kill stuff, and I guess it gets the job done. Now, ordinarily, I tend to do these reviews with a very straightforward formula. I cover the interface, the gameplay, and then give a quick evaluation of the art and sound design, as well as my overall take on the game. But I think this time it's important to give some idea of what I thought the game was going to be like going in. I was browsing through titles with the RPG tag on Steam, as I often do, and I have been finding increasingly useless of late, and I see One More Dungeon. It was on sale at the time, so I picked it up, thinking I might be able to cover it. The tags were RPG, Action Roguelike, Dungeon Crawler, Indie, and I've had a great deal of luck with those exact tags. The pixel art graphics looked like a more colorful version of Delver and Barony, which are also action roguelikes, the latter of which I really enjoy. So I picked it up, just assuming that it would be something similar. So one of the first things that I noted when starting the game is that there's a high score display. Oh no. Anyway, when you start a new game, you're given a selection of mutators. These are actually this game's attempt at persistent progress. As you adventure through the game, you collect points that can be used to purchase these mutations. You may have up to 2 active at any one time. Some are extremely useful, akin to easier difficulty modes that have to be unlocked. Some make the game substantially more difficult, some are graphical changes, and so forth. Once you've selected your 2, you enter the game. Entering the game lets you see the interface, which is pretty straightforward. In the upper left is your score and your tokens. The score is used to purchase mutations between runs. I gotta be honest, I played the game as much as I could possibly stand, and I still have no idea what the tokens are for. The middle top of the screen has your hotkey bar. Things are placed here for ease of use and for switching out of gear, but can be changed with items in your inventory during the game. To your upper right are your crystal totals. There are 3 types of crystals that you can pick up during the game: red, blue, and green, and they are used as ammunition for the different spell staffs that you can pick up. Each staff has a different crystal requirement to fire based on its effect, and I actually kind of like that idea. In the lower left is your artifact icon, once you've picked up an artifact at least, as well as a portrait that changes based on your health and status, akin to Doom or Wolfenstein. Beside this are your health and sanity meters. Health is just basically hit points. It depletes when you're hit, and sanity is depleted as you use your artifacts. In the lower right-hand side are your equipped weapon and spell staff. You may equip one of each, and they are fired off by the right and left mouse buttons respectively. At any time, you can access your inventory by pressing I. This gives you 18 more slots to store stuff that you picked up, which you can switch with your hotkeyed items above. This also shows your equipped weapon and staff, equipped artifact, as well as 3 additional equipment slots, 2 rings and an amulet, which may modify your effectiveness and defense. Your active mutators are also listed here, in case you forgot. If you're wondering where your stats are, well, there aren't any. As close as you get to stats are your attack and defense from your various weapons and equipped items, and your health and your stamina. Health can be improved over the game, although not through experience. Rather, you activate health shrines, which not only heal you a little bit, but also raise your max hit points. You may also hold down the tab key to see a map of the level that you're on, or at least what you've uncovered. This isn't actually a toggle, but rather the map only appears while you hold the key down, and that can become frustrating, like many other things in this game. The overall goal of each level is to get the seal to the exit, then use it to unlock the exit and proceed onward. During each level, you wander around fighting monsters through either melee or spellcasting. uncover secrets to obtain new weapons and spell staves, and occasionally open chests for loot. Every so often, you uncover a portal that can lead to a sub-map or sub-level in an alternate dimension. These are usually full of traps rather than creatures and contain artifacts, which are specialized magical items that can be used for particular effects. You may also find a number of potions during play, the most useful of which are the healing and regeneration potions. Healing, of course, restores health instantly, while regeneration restores it over time. Other potions are situationally useful, such as an antidote when poisoned. As far as equipment goes, each weapon has a damage type. This is usually given as a physical range based on the type of the weapon and the material, although enchanted weapons exist that give additional elemental damage, and I believe it's frost, fire, acid, and void. Staves are similar, having an effect that will deal either physical damage or elemental damage. Mostly elemental damage when you're dealing with staff effects. Staves have what crystals they use as ammo on each shot listed as well. These vary and are based on the elements and effects involved. The fire staff, for instance, uses 2 red crystals per shot, while another staff may use 1 of each, or 1 red or 1 blue or whatever. Each of the stave's shots has its own speed and trajectory. For instance, the fire staff shoots a projectile in a bit of variance, but generally directly ahead for a fair distance, while the earth staff chucks a rock that falls to the ground relatively quickly, but does a fair amount of damage if it hits something. Some staves have special effects besides damage as well. The wind staff, for instance, doesn't damage enemies, but rather pushes them back when it hits them. Artifacts may have a variety of effects as well, and using them costs sanity. When your sanity is low, then you have a visual effect that covers the screen, making play more difficult. It's an interesting touch, but I would have liked to see it a bit more fleshed out. While adventuring in the dungeon, you'll find various shrines, most importantly health shrines, which have the effects when clicked on. You may also uncover keys to unlock chests. Secret doors are just wall blocks that move when they're activated and usually reveal a new weapon or wand. You will encounter various barrels or boxes that can be smashed. These can reveal items such as ammunition crystals, but may also release enemies. Other features may be found in the dungeon as well. Traps are a big part of it, but are usually pretty obvious, but there's also things like the crystal grinder, which can be used to discard unneeded equipment in order to receive crystals in return. Enemies are plentiful in the dungeon and come in a variety of different types. Most simply run at you, while some have ranged attacks that do elemental damage, and a few have special attacks such as poison. Dealing with these is done in a manner similar to other FPS or dungeon crawler games. Once you die, you are simply sent back to the title screen, where you can use your accrued points to buy another mutator and try the game again. Graphically, the game has a blocky pixel art style placed on a thick block Wolfenstein-style map. Doors slide away rather than swing, and the entire map can be represented on a grid. Enemies are extremely pixelated billboard-style sprites, while decorations on the map itself are weirdly low-poly 3D. And that's alright, but it makes for a little bit of a contrast with the classic 90s style aesthetic of the rest of the dungeon. The interface is alright, while the little Doom Guy style face is a nice touch, but next to useless, as often was the case with the ones it is modeled off of. The art style is at least otherwise consistent and brightly colored and pleasant. It did really remind me of Delver and Barony, at least visually. In terms of sound design, the sound effects are serviceable, but the ambient music, it's theoretically good, but it does wear on one. It's not bad to start, but it gets very repetitive very swiftly. In fact, one of the people watching me record footage for this review said something to the effect of they worked in retail and this was worse than the stuff that they listened to going on in the background in retail. Now, it can be turned off, thankfully, which is good, but it shouldn't be that way in the first place. The gameplay itself is repetitive and just seems to fall short in a bunch of areas. There's an advancement system of a sort with the health build-up, weapons and item progression, and mutators, but it's nowhere near complex enough to really qualify as an RPG in my eyes, and I've qualified some really bare-bones systems as RPGs in the past. As an FPS, it's certainly got the speedy pace of the classic 90s era FPS games, but with an even simpler AI that has pretty much everything that's not ranged to charge at you and everything that is ranged to just stand back and shoot you. Combined with the procedurally generated levels, it can become very boring very quickly. Even the sanity system seems a little bit shallow. Artifacts are semi-useful, but they quickly deplete sanity, and therefore their use is limited, unless you want an ugly overlay over the screen. The overlay for sanity loss itself is similar to the one used for poison and other debuffs, it's just a different color. All in all, One More Dungeon looks like the sort of game that I should like, except it just falls short on every level. I wanted to say that it's not a terrible game, but it's just aggressively mediocre. There's almost nothing that it does that some other entry into the pixelated first-person roguelike genre doesn't do very much better. Barony for more depth, Delver for better action play, etc. The one saving grace is that it's relatively inexpensive. If you can find it on sale, it might be a decent little time killer from time to time, but that's about all I can recommend it for. I think the worst part about One More Dungeon isn't that it's bad. It's just that it's not good. There's some ideas in there with a little bit more depth and development that would have pushed it over the edge into being a good game, but it just falls short across the board on those. And I'm not angry at it. I'm just disappointed. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday. As always, I'll put a link to where you can pick this one up below, and next week I'm going to go for a more proper role-playing game, and I'll probably even make a video on what even qualifies as a computer role-playing game, since that is a big question nowadays. Anyway, if you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.